good to see you again. It's me, John Mark, and I'm joined by my team again. Long ago, I mean nearly 4,000 years ago, people called the Israelites, who believed in God and they knew about God, but they had become slaves in Egypt. They'd gone to Egypt and they'd grown and become more and more. And the Pharaoh, you will have heard of Pharaoh and remember those pharaohs and the pyramids. Well, in the time of the pharaohs, one pharaoh thought, hang on, these Israelites, they're getting so many of them. What if they take over us? And so you know what he did? He made them all slaves. He made them really work hard, building lots of things for Egypt. Anyway, at that time, God heard the Israelites crying out to him, and he raised up the most unexpected man you could ever imagine. Now, this man was 80 years old. He had been wandering around in the desert for 40 years looking after sheep when God suddenly appeared to him. It was in a burning bush. Now, in the desert, you get a lot of burning bushes, but this one wouldn't burn up. Moses noticed, and he went there to see what it was. And when he got to the burning bush, God spoke to him and said, Moses, I want to use you to save the Israelites out of Egypt. Well, it's a long and it's a wonderful story. They were in the desert, crossing the desert, to finally get to the place where God had for them. He called it the Promised Land, because he had promised the land to them. Promised land. Anyway, finally they enter this Promised Land, and they begin to live there, but it's not easy. God needs to, in some way, talk to his people, and he does that through somebody called a prophet. And this story, we're going to hear of somebody who will be a prophet for God.
Samuel hears a voice. Now that God's people were living in their own land, there were so many things he wanted to tell them.
How to be happy, how to take care of each other, and how to protect themselves from their enemies.
So God decided to choose someone to speak for him, someone he could talk to, who would then go and talk to the people. Someone called a prophet. God looked and looked all over the land of Israel, eager to pick just the right person. And finally he found him. In the village of Shiloh, in the house of Eli the priest. A little boy.
Samuel!
God called one night.
Samuel, I want to talk with you.
Samuel sat up and rubbed his sleepy eyes. He'd never heard God's voice before, and he thought that old Eli was calling him. He stumbled into Eli's room to see what he wanted.
Eli! Eli!
But Eli just shooed him back to bed.
Samuel! Samuel!
Samuel was confused this time and a little scared. So he crept back into Eli's room.
Eli! Eli!
Oh, Samuel, I didn't call you. Please go back to bed. I've got to catch a few Z's, okay? And
Samuel didn't know what to think as he crawled under his covers. But when God called,
Samuel! Samuel!
for the third time, he knew what to do. He dashed back to Eli just as fast as he could.
Eli! Eli!
Eli!
Oh, you again. Oh, all right. If any one of us is going to sleep at all tonight, we need to find out whose voice that is. And I think I know who it might be. So listen. If that happens again, I want you to say something after me, okay? I want you all to say something after me. I want you to say, "Speak, Lord, and I will listen." I'll take that again. I want you all to say, "Speak, Lord, and I will listen." You got it? Now I've got to catch some Z's, okay? Good night.
Samuel's eyes opened wide.
Eli? Do you mean it's God trying to call me?
Why don't you do what I said and we will both find out? How's that? Good night.
So Samuel went back to bed. God called his name again.
Samuel, Samuel.
This time, Samuel stayed there and listened to God, and his eyes opened wide with wonder. And from that moment until Samuel was himself an old man, God talked to Samuel, giving him messages to pass on to the people. And just like the first time, God's messages never failed to leave him wide-eyed with wonder.
Well, that was the story. Samuel was called a prophet. Do you remember what a prophet is? Somebody who is chosen by God, whom God could speak to them, and they would tell other people what God had said. There are many prophets in the Bible. Samuel was one of them. Now, what I'd like you to do is to close your eyes, and I want you to try to imagine that you were that boy Samuel, and you heard God's voice. I wonder what God's voice was like. Was it loud and booming? Was it gentle and reassuring? And just while we have our eyes closed, I'm going to say a prayer, and if you agree, you can say amen at the end. Dear God, thank you that you spoke to Samuel, even though he was just a small boy at the time. Thank you that you can speak to everybody. Please help us to listen. Amen. Thank you so much. That's been another story from the Open the Book team. We hope you've enjoyed it. We hope you've learned something, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Have a good couple of weeks. And listen up. God bless. Bye-bye.